Hello, guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Unique Items. Today we're going to be looking at a bow called the Wizendraw. Now, Wizendraw is one of my favorites, and there's a lot of reasons why it became one of my favorites. Most notably is because it's very easy to come by, and it is a very powerful bow that has a lot of very nice uses. The unfortunate side effects of Wizendraw is that it does have some very, very poor rolls, which we will go over with this bow. Now, the Wizendraw has a damage of 5 to 32, which is it's okay for level 26. It has a required dexterity of 50 and a required strength of 40, which is not bad. It has a very fast attack speed, which is only because it does have a 20% increased attack speed, and it also has a varied attack speed on characters that are not Amazons. So if you don't know this, some characters have slower attack speed with bows than others. We also have a Fires Magic Arrows mechanic, which is the magic arrow ability that Amazons have, and if you can actually go and take a look at it. So as you can see, creates a magical arrow or bolt that does extra damage, converts 10% physical damage to magic attack rating bonus, and it also adds a flat damage to the attack as well. Now the magical arrow that comes out of the Wizendraw when you fire the bow, so if you just walk out and you actually just fire with a regular attack, you will see the magic arrows come out. Now, the magic arrows are actually quite powerful because they deal magic damage, but the ones that come from the Wizendraw bow are level 5. And what this means is that the Wizendraw bow fires 5% magic damage arrows. So it converts 5% of your physical damage into magic damage, which can help you bypass some physical immunes. It also gives you a bonus to attack rating of 46%, and it adds 5 damage to the attack, which is it's a lot more than you think because it adds it to kind of like the base of the weapon. It's not really a whole lot, but it's definitely a lot more than just simply adding 5 to 1,356. It doesn't just go to 1,361. It's since it's added to the base, it actually adds more than you think. It's just not a ton. It's like adding 5 min, 5 max, which still is a decent amount. Now we also have some other effects on this, like enhanced damage. The enhanced damage on Wizendraw does vary by 10%, which isn't huge, but if you are going to use this as one of your main weapons, you would definitely want to have the 80. So we've got 70 to 80%. We also have an attack rating variance of 50 to 100, which is pretty big. The attack rating is a pretty big deal when you're talking about a character who's trying to hit his targets, or her targets, as far as the Amazon is concerned, because that attack rating actually does get multiplied by quite a lot of skills. So, you know, when you're firing your skills or your abilities, you've got Penetrate, which will increase your attack rating by 315%. You know, let's say you were using multi-shot, or sorry, not multi-shot. Where's the... trying to think of freezing arrow, but I only have like level 1 freezing arrow here. It would probably be another 300%, and then the bow itself is giving you 100, so you're talking about like a 600% bonus to your 100, which usually ends up being quite a lot more than just simply 100. And trust me when I say it's nice to have a larger flat bonus when you're dealing with lots of plus percentages, because those plus percentages are going to make a really big difference in the amount of attack rating that you've got. Let me use Witch Wild String as an example here. You see that Witch Wild String, it does not have any flat attack rating on it or any attack rating percentage, and because of that, it has less attack rating. You see 4,855. Whereas when I switch over to Wizendraw, we go up to 5,270, and that is due to that 100 attack rating. And that is a lot more than 100. 4,855 to 5,270 is a good 400 attack rating because of the bonuses. And we're also getting another flat bonus from the magic arrow of, I think it was like 45% we were just looking at. So, you know, it's 46%. So we got a lot of bonuses which are affecting that 100. We also have another statistic which varies by quite a lot, and is unfortunately the statistic which will determine whether you throw this Wizendraw back on the ground or not. It has a negative enemy cold resistance of -20 to -35%. And this is an effect that not a lot of items have. If you're a sorceress, you don't necessarily need this because you are running Cold Mastery. However, Cold Mastery is level 30. And for the very brief period of time of level 26 to level 30, you can be using Wizendraw, which will actually have a huge effect on the amount of damage that you put out as a cold sorceress. But the real beautiful use for the Wizendraw is the Cold Amazon. So if you are a Freezing Arrow Amazon, which is a very powerful build, you can utilize the Wizendraw to increase your damage by a pretty huge percentage versus any monster who is nearly immune to cold, and by basically 35% by monsters who are relatively non-immune. If you're wondering how that calculation works, it's very simple. If a monster has like 90% resistance to cold, and let's say I was doing 2,000 cold damage, 2,000 minus 90% is most of my damage gone. I'm only dealing 200 cold damage, so it's ridiculous. But if I'm using the Wizendraw and I deal out 2,000 damage, I would minus by less than 90%. So 90% minus 35%. So we're getting a very nice change in the amount of resistance that that monster has. Now that does only apply to us. It's important that you keep that in mind, is it only applies to us, doesn't apply to anyone else in the group. And if our mercenary is using it, it doesn't apply to us at all. It only applies to the mercenary. But 90% goes down to 55%. And so we run the same calculation of 2,000 ice damage minus 55%, and now we're looking at 900 damage instead of 200. And you can see that multiplying it by 2 would only be 200 to 400, right? So multiplying it by 3 would be, and so forth and so on. And so we got 2, 4, 6, 8. So we're literally at 2, 4, 6, 8. What was it? 4.5 times the amount of damage just for having that negative 34% cold resistance. And granted, when the monster is at 0, and this is important, if the monster is already at 0% cold resistance, then they are going to be at negative 35%. So 2,000 cold damage by a monster that has 0% cold resistance is just going to be 2,000 flat. However, if we have the Wizendraw on, we will get a bonus of 35%, which will give us 2,700. So as you can see, Wizendraw has a very strong effect on Freezing Arrow. And the other interesting thing about Freezing Arrow is that because of the skill Pierce, Freezing Arrow will hit multiple times. So this bonus damage will have multiple increases to your damage for each shot you fire. So for instance, if I were to fire that shot of 2,700 damage, which was at the 0% cold resistant monster, and I hit, let's say I pierce through, and I hit 2 or 3 or 4 monsters, let's say 4, that's a good number. So we're going to multiply this by 4. All right, now that's 10,800 damage. All right, but I only pierced through 4, but there was 10 there within range of the explosion. The explosion is a radius. So now I have to take this 10,800, and we got to go back. So we got to go 2,700 times 10 because it really hit. It pierced 4 times, but it hit 10 monsters 4 times each. So it's 2,700 times 10. And then it's again 2,700, it's 27,000 now, so 27,000 times 4. So we're looking at 108,000 damage to all those monsters within the radial cone of the Freezing Arrow strike, which is amazing. So when you think about the negative 35% enemy cold resistance, don't think about it as just giving you a 35% damage bonus to the number written on the skill, because Freezing Arrow is a multiplicative skill which does more and more damage depending on how many monsters are there, and this is important. All right, so let's go to the next effect here, and before we do that, let's just talk about really quickly why it's so sad that if you find a Wizendraw with negative 20%, which is the bottom roll, so negative 20% is the lowest possible roll that you can get on a Wizendraw. it's really not worth hanging on to. You want to find one that's somewhere in the 30% range, 32, 33, 34, 35 is technically perfect, and a negative 35% enemy cold resistance Wizendraw is very, very effective on your Ice Amazon. We also have plus 15 to energy, which is always nice to have on an Ice Amazon because Ice Amazons are freaking mana hogs, let me tell you. And then we have 30 to mana, which is another boost to your mana. So not only do we have 15 to energy, which is going to give you a pretty decent chunk of mana, we also have 30 to mana. So when we take a look at our mana pool here, we have 560, and when we put on the bow, we go to 612, which is not bad. And if we have any sources of plus maximum mana, that will also beef that up even further. It also has 26% cold resistance on it. 26% cold resistance, of course, is not really the greatest thing in the world, but it's nice to have. Now for sockets on this particular thing, because it is an elemental damage bow, generally used for elemental damage characters, a lot of people just tend to put a shale rune in here. Attacking faster when you're dealing elemental damage is usually better because unlike with physical damage, which is restricted by the speed and damage of the bow or the weapon that you're using. You know, if you're using a big, massive hammer, it's big hits with slow attacks. Whereas if you're using a little tiny hammer, it's fast attacks with low damage. Elemental attacks don't work that way. Elemental attacks literally just do the same amount of damage no matter what bow you're firing. So the faster you fire tends to be the better. Now, we're going to upgrade this. We're going to take a look at this and we're going to upgrade it. So let's go ahead and throw this in the bank here, and in the Heraldric cube, and we're gonna need trying to think here. What is it? Is it a Ral and a Soul, or is it a Lum and a Paul? I believe it's a Ral, a Soul, and a Perfect Emerald is what we're going to need. Let me see if I have those laying around. I have a Ral. I have a Soul, and I have a Perfect Emerald. Look at that. So we're going to go from 5 to 32 damage, 50 dexterity, 40 strength, level 26 requirement with a very fast attack speed. And that is going to go to 18 to 75 damage, dexterity 95, strength required 80, and level 31. So not a bad upgrade at all. Only going from level 26 to 31 is actually great. That is a really solid one-tier upgrade, and I think honestly that is perfectly fine for a Freezing Arrow Amazon. And if you were going to do that for your Freezing Arrow Amazon, I would definitely try and find one that has a higher negative enemy cold resistance, something like negative 30 to negative 35%. Otherwise there's no point in going through the process of upgrading it twice and socketing it and shaling it and all that stuff. Try and find a better version before you go through all that trouble. And we're going to upgrade this another time, so we're going to need a Lum rune, and we're also going to need a Pull rune, and we're going to need another Perfect Emerald. So the second upgrade is going to take us from the large siege bow, I believe, to the Crusader bow, I want to say. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it's Crusader. 18 to 75 with a dexterity requirement of 95, strength of 80, and a required level of 31. To a Crusader bow, 27 to 113, dexterity 121, strength 97, and a level requirement of 69. So, not exactly a terrible upgrade. The damage on it isn't the greatest, but if you are a Freezing Arrow Amazon, you're not too worried about physical damage. You're actually more interested in the cold here. So if you did have a relatively nice Wizendraw bow that rolled, like 80% ED, high on the attack rating, and 35% negative cold resistance, you could probably upgrade this 3 times and use this on a Freezing Arrow Amazon with absolutely no problems. Now, if I were a Freezing Arrow Amazon, I would probably have another option for physical damage. I would probably have maybe something like the Wizendraw bow, the Witch Wild String bow handy for physical damage, so that if I came across a monster that was immune to cold, I could deal with them. Because, unfortunately, when it comes to cold-resistant monsters, there tends to be a lot of them in Hell difficulty, and they are, unfortunately, unbreakable like 90% of the time. So do keep that in mind. And I actually have a Freezing Arrow Amazon right now, who I believe is using a Wizendraw. So let's go take a look at her, shall we? I believe that is TNT. She's my dual spec fire/ice Amazon. So she actually does both specs, which is pretty cool. And let's take her into a game real quick, shall we? And we'll show off the Wizendraw. The Wizendraw. A game already exists with that name. Who dares use my game? Who dare? I've been using the name so much, but it's just people they'd be rolling with it. They just be rolling. Ain't even nobody in here. So as you can see, I actually do have the Witch Wild String upgraded with a shale. And I believe my Wizendraw is sitting in the stash. It is. And it's negative 34% enemy cold resistance, which I got 64 attack rating, which isn't too bad, and 73% enhanced. That's why I upgraded this one to the large siege bow. I actually still need to upgrade this one to the Crusader's bow. It's something I haven't done yet. I don't think I have a Pull rune laying around, which I'll have to find one later. Plenty of lums, though. And I got a couple gulls and a couple other nice things. Like I got an Istern laying around in one of these stashes. Yeah, we'll get over here and put it in there. Get in there right stash. So let's go play around with this, shall we? Can't do Eldritch because Eldritch is always immune to cold. It's nice to know these things. So let's go somewhere where the Frost Amazon, the Freezing Arrow Amazon, does exceedingly well, which you would actually laugh to know is actually Maggot Lair. And I'm not going to bore you guys with me trying to find it, so I'll be right back. Alright, here we are. So the reason why the Maggot Lair is actually such a good place for bow Amazons, as well as Javazons, although not quite as good for Javazons, it's just simply because of the way that everything is clustered together, and the way that the skills work with their piercing abilities. As you can see, this is Hell difficulty, and in Hell difficulty, I can do exceedingly well here by utilizing the walls for explosive effect, by piercing through targets, and as I was talking about earlier, when we were talking about monsters clustered together, 4 or 5 pierces times the amount of damage I'm dishing out times the the number of targets within the radius zone can actually lead to a massive amount of ice damage. And the Wizendraw bow in Hell difficulty assists this greatly by reducing the resistance of all the monsters that I'm hitting, giving me a rather massive amount of ice damage. And the reason why Maggot Lair just works so exceedingly well is because the monsters are all nicely clustered, and also the walls provide an extra explosion. So I don't know if you guys noticed, but when the arrows hit the wall, there is an additional explosion that happens at the contact point. And this is useful for a lot of characters. If you are a Lightning Fury Javazon, if you are Exploding Arrow Amazon, if you are an Ice Freezing Arrow Amazon, a lot of these abilities have a contact point explosion, which can be very useful for taking out monsters. And it's nice to keep that in mind. Now, I do like to keep these videos relatively short, so I'm going to go into the final bits here for this bow. Is this bow useful on anyone else other than a Freezing Arrow Amazon? Well, it can be moderately useful on a sorceress, as I said earlier, a cold sorceress for some really low-level times. So if you are a very low-level cold sorceress and you would like to get the negative 34% enemy cold resistance, that is perfectly doable. As you build up your cold mastery, though, you're probably not going to need this anymore. You could also theoretically use this on a Hurricane Druid because they dish out a relatively large amount of cold damage, and they don't have any form of negative enemy cold resistance, and negative 30% is a lot. You can also theoretically socket this and put a cold facet in here to enhance the negative cold resistance and also enhance cold skill damage. So you could beef this up theoretically. If you had a perfect Wizendraw and a perfect cold facet, you could end up at negative 40% enemy cold resistance with plus 5% cold skill damage, which is pretty darn sweet. And you could also theoretically use this on a Holy Freeze Paladin. So if you were to build a Holy Freeze Paladin specifically dedicated to the Holy Freeze aura, and you wanted to apply that Holy Freeze damage in some specific way, the Wizendraw bow would be an interesting way to apply that damage and have a rather large buff to the damage while you're doing it. Since Holy Freeze applies cold damage on attack, it would definitely be very nice. Now, unfortunately, it's not going to be as fun as Freezing Arrow, because Freezing Arrow has the explosion radius, and Holy Freeze does not, and he would have to use regular arrows, which would be magic arrows, which is kind of nice. So it is interesting to point out that if you do use this on a non-Amazon character, you will get the nice, beautiful magic arrows, which will not consume arrows. So you will have the interesting benefit of being able to fire your bow and have your arrows not go down. So as you can see here, I have 253, and when I am firing the magic arrows, they just do not diminish, because magic arrows do not consume arrows. And it's interesting. Anyway, as always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos. And if you want to find this bow, it is a low-level bow, and it drops from just about anywhere in... I think it's like normal difficulty, Act 4 through 5, up to all the way up to Hell. You might actually see this from Mephisto, but chances are probably Act 4, Act 5, normal difficulty and up. Anyway, as always, thanks for watching, and keep watching.